Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. So as we come up to the end of Chapter 7, Tolkien continues to weave these mysteries for us, and after a brief reprieve, a brief resting moment for the party to kind of catch their breath and resupply, they are back on their way again. And in very Tolkien fashion, the stakes are raising, the tension is rising. We're moving from a place of relaxation and a little bit of humor kind of sprinkled in to, well, the boundaries of Mirkwood. And not only are we reminded a few times during this section of the story how dangerous the upcoming journey is, the rest of their journey is, but we're also told that, well, the dwarves and Bilbo are going to have to go at this next part of the journey alone. Gandalf is leaving them. And this is something that happens in stories like this when you have a character who represents a much more powerful, capable character who would lower the tension if they were included. A character who makes things too easy for everybody else there. Things like this happen in Marvel movies all the time. You have a character like Thor, a literal god of thunder, somebody who outpaces most of the Avengers when he first shows up in the Avengers movie. I mean, you've got a guy in an iron suit, you have a super soldier, you have a guy who turns into a Hulk, but then you have a guy who shoots arrows very, very accurately, and a super spy. But Thor is a different kind of thing. He's an alien who can summon the power of lightning at will. And so what do you do with that scenario? Well, you isolate or you remove the most powerful individual from the group so that the tension can naturally rise for everyone else. This is a very similar situation you have here. Gandalf, as we have seen, has come to the aid of the party multiple times. He's gotten them out of these dangerous situations with the trolls, with the goblins. He's been kind of their ace in the hole, their cheat code to the situations they've had to deal with. So it raises the question, what would happen if Gandalf isn't there? How would they have dealt with the trolls or the goblin situation? I think looking back on it, it's easy to determine the answer for that. They would have failed. They would have been eaten or killed, captured, or worse. Gandalf has been the one since the beginning who has ensured their safety, and they are about to embark on something that is darker and more mysterious than anything they've come across yet. And this is the moment where Gandalf decides that he needs to go somewhere else, but yet feels confident leaving the dwarves with Bilbo in his stead. Now, next week's episode will deal with the actual ramifications of that decision for the first time. This week, we're building up to that moment. So let's get into it. So Bjorn has just given them advice about the forest. Do not drink from the water. Do not bathe in it. It carries an enchantment, drowsiness, and forgetfulness. And yet, it's so much more than just that. But we're not going to get there on this episode. This section starts out with this. That is all the advice I can give you. And this is Bjorn speaking. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. You must depend on your luck and your courage and the food I send with you. Now, this is interesting because it's sort of foreshadowing some stuff here. Beyond the edge of the forest, I cannot help you much. Later on in this section of the chapter, we find out that Bjorn does follow them to the edge of the forest. He, at this point, is very fond of his visitors, who he was very skeptical about just a few days ago. And yet he wants to make sure that they are as safe as they can be. And that's why he gives them food. It's why he gives them advice about the forest. He sees them as allies, as strong allies fighting against the goblins. And that is his main motivation here. Also in this section, he brings up, you must depend on your luck and your courage and the food I send with you. These are foreshadowings as well. I'm not 100% sure about this, but every time luck comes up in the story, I feel like that is a very subtle nod to either the decisions that you are making align directly with the will of Iluvatar, or Iluvatar himself will reach into the world and it'll appear lucky, but you will be granted something that you normally wouldn't be able to do or have, or a situation plays out in a very fortunate way. And so there's this kind of entanglement between luck and good fortune and the actual will of Iluvatar. Are you in the right moment at the right time? That sort of thing. Now, also, he brings up here your courage, the very thing that allows Bilbo to achieve the great deeds that he does from this part of the story onward becomes courage. He finds in himself a courage that he does not know is there. But again, we aren't quite there yet. We're still in the land of foreshadowing, the things that happen in the shadows of the trees. I guess that kind of makes sense. So he goes on and says, at the gate of the forest, I must ask you to send back my horses and my ponies, but I wish you all speed, and my house is open to you if ever you come back this way again. Now, why does he ask for the horses and the ponies, or the horse and the ponies back? Well, first of all, they wouldn't be very safe in the forest to begin with. Secondly, they're his friends, and he is lending them their aid to the place where they feel safe. And if they don't feel safe going in the forest, then he's going to try to make sure that they stay safe and come back. And then after this, they thank him and they bow, and we see, many bows and the sweeping of hoods. We don't get a wagging of beards in this moment because we're beyond the comedic relief part of this. Things have become more serious again. And they call him Master of the Wide Wooden Halls. And for this section of the story, we get the first reminder that things are becoming dangerous. It says here, far more dangerous than they had thought. And at the end of this all, there's still a dragon waiting. So they spend some time in the morning with preparations. In fact, they spend all morning busy with preparations. And I feel like this is another one of those little nods to Tolkien's experience in the military, taking the time to prepare, pull your stuff together, work together to make sure everybody has their supplies, everything's strapped on your backs, on the ponies, everything's double, triple checked, ready to go, that sort of thing. It is important at this point that they do not forget anything. They have every piece of food, every piece of equipment, and everybody is dividing the load between each of them, to the point where even Bilbo feels a bit over-encumbered here, but we'll get to that in a little bit. And so now we begin the journey. They head off past the fenced lands, so past the safe lands, and we're getting further and further into another dangerous section of the wilds, the land of the Fae, in Tolkien's words outside of this story. And we get this. By his advice, they were no longer making for the main forest road to the south of his land. Of his is, of course, Bjorn. Had they followed the pass, their path would have led them down a stream from the mountains that joined the great river miles south of the Carrick. At that point, there was a deep ford, which they might have passed if they had still had their ponies, and beyond that, a track led to the skirts of the wood and to the entrance of the old forest road. Now notice this entire section. This is a very, very large amount of text in the middle of a very large paragraph, is about the things that they don't actually do. This is about what they would have done, and it goes into very specific detail. Now, why would Tolkien spend the time to tell us about the things that they aren't actually doing right now? And I think I understand why. There's something about understanding the world beyond what the characters are actually engaging in that builds the world. This is sort of a world building 101 type of thing. If we only knew where they were at currently and where they were going, we wouldn't understand the contrast of that with what would normally happen. They're not going to the main road that goes through Mirkwood. They're not headed down the river the other direction. we would never have had that experience. So by laying this out here, we have something to contrast their future experience with. And Bjorn warns them why they're not going that direction. This way is often used by the goblins now. The forest road is overgrown. It's not used anymore. And it leads to these impassable marshes. This is a part of the world that used to be safe to travel in, or at least safer to travel in a time where people were moving around a little bit more. When would that have been? My assumption is during the height of the kingdom of Arnor, when people would have been traveling between the kingdom in the north and the kingdom in the south. A previous time before the necromancer came to Mirkwood and corrupted the forest. Before orcs moved back into the mountains and were watching all the passes. There was a time where these roads would have been heavily traveled by not just adventurers wandering in the wild or somebody like Aragorn and the Rangers, but by travelers and merchants, people moving between the two kingdoms because they have work to do in the different cities. But that time no longer exists. This is a world of wild things. And so you don't keep to the main roads because they are no longer used as main roads. And because of that, they are more dangerous than you would expect. Now, Gandalf would have known this as well, but we get this information from Bjorn because it's showing that Bjorn genuinely cares about their journey and where they're going and their safety. He advises them to head north of the Carrock, so back the direction they came from, but on the other side of the river. And he tells us that Mirkwood drew closer to the borders of the Great River up here. Now notice, Mirkwood is the actor. Mirkwood is drawing closer. There's action here. And this isn't the only time we get this kind of phrasing. Mirkwood seems like a living thing making decisions. Now, he advises them to go this way and tells them it's a few days' ride, and then you'll go through the paths, and you'll actually come out the other side closer to the Lonely Mountain than you would have come out had you gone south. But just because this is safer, in his estimation, than the way south, it doesn't mean it's completely safe. In fact, they're heading back toward where the goblins are. He explains that they won't dare cross the river, they won't dare come near his property because they know it's dangerous. And he also mentions that his property is well protected at night, which gives us a little bit more of a hint about who these bears are and how often they come to his property. It seems like this might be a nightly occurrence, that these individuals have not traveled from far distances. This isn't something like a monthly or quarterly or yearly celebration that we just happen to be there on that night. No, these bears show up all the time. And if they are of the same stock as Bjorn, and we do know that those footprints included some very large bears, then of course the goblins aren't going to have to deal with them because that would be extremely dangerous. But he also warns them that they are planning their raid. They might be down that way, but he does say this: still you are safer going north, even though you seem to be going back nearer to their strongholds, for that is what they least expect. Now, does this sound familiar to you? When I read it again, prepping for this episode, a little voice in the back of my head said, wait a minute. Turns out that there is a similar line in the movie version of The Lord of the Rings that doesn't happen in the Lord of the Rings books. And it's probably because Fran Walsh and Peter Jackson and anybody else they had contributing to the writing had a very strong understanding of Tolkien's work. Now, whether they were actually referencing this one little line from The Hobbit in The Lord of the Rings, or whether this was just something in the back of their minds about the spirit with which Tolkien tended to write things. Remember this line. Pippin says, "The closer we are to danger, the further we are from harm. It's the last thing he'll expect." This is when they're talking to Treebeard about going back towards Isengard. This is his reasoning here, which is the same reasoning for Bjorn sending them north. You are still safer going north, even though you seem to be going back nearer to their strongholds, for that is what they least expect. It's the same exact reasoning. Now, I double-checked. This doesn't show up in The Lord of the Rings. So this was something that they included specifically for the movies, because that scene is very different in the movie than it is in the book. But the spirit of the idea of the text is the same. This is something that happens in the Rings of Power series as well. When I talk about the spirit of the show, for any of its flaws, it's not a perfect series, but the spirit of the show matches oftentimes the kinds of things that Tolkien has written in other places. That's one of the things right there. So they head off without Bjorn, and for the first part, they're riding in silence. This is a tonal difference from where they were before and what they were doing before. When they were at Bjorn's house, they were a little bit scared at night, or at least Bilbo was. But during the day, the dwarves were in pretty good moods, and they were eating good food, and they were having a time to rest, but they didn't need to feel silent. But now they're silent. The mood is dropping. The evening comes, and we get a little scene here. The dusk comes on, and we get this nice descriptive line about dusk came on and the peaks of the mountains glowered against the sunset. They made a camp and set a guard. This is, again, a very common thing, and I think probably something that you do in the military. Again, I haven't served in the military. I didn't serve in World War I. I didn't exist back then. All of us didn't, I guess, at this point. But this would be something you do. Even at night, you keep a guard, right? And this is something that happens in these books all the time. And this time, they sleep. Most of them sleep uneasy, it says. And they had dreams. And remember, dreams are important things. And in these dreams, there was the howl of hunting wolves and the cries of goblins. My guess here is that this is more than just their imaginations and their fears showing up in their dreams, although that is a very common thing that happens in dreams. I would guess that these are warnings. This is actually happening. And it seems like that's a fair guess, because we have a similar situation happen with Bilbo just earlier in this chapter, where he's dreaming of the very thing that was happening outside Bjorn's house. So the next morning dawns, and it says here, bright and fair again. And I think these are all very intentional things. It's foreshadowing that this day is going to be a good day. They're scared. They're uncomfortable, but it's okay still. And then this feels very symbolic. The air was chill, but soon the sun rose red in the east and the mists vanished. And while the shadows were still long, they were off again. The shadows are creeping back. The mists are creeping in and then vanishing. The sun is pushing these things away. But pretty soon, as we know, the sun won't be able to do that. The sun rarely pierces the canopy of Mirkwood. And then we get descriptions, like Tolkien likes to do, of the wild things along their path. And this is going to serve as a baseline with which to contrast things in the future. There's grass and flowers and birds and scattered trees, occasionally a small herd of red deer browsing or sitting at noon in the shade. The animals at this point are comfortable. They feel safe. They're acting normally. And then we get little details that Bilbo is starting to notice. Horns of the harts sticking up out of the long grass. And at first they thought they were dead branches of trees. But no, these are the horns of these deer. Everything still feels normal. And Bilbo is noticing this. But then Bilbo notices something else. He thought he saw away to the right or to the left the shadowy form of a great bear prowling along in the same direction. But if he dared to mention it to Gandalf, the wizard only said, "Hush, take no notice." Good old grumpy Gandalf. Bilbo starts to notice that Bjorn is following them. He's keeping to the boundaries of their vision, far off. So the question becomes, why is Bjorn doing this? Now, the immediate answer is, well, of course, he's following them in order to keep them safe. If something were to happen, he could show up and help fight off goblins or whatever. But there's more to it than that. Why is he not up with the party? If he's traveling all this distance, why not travel with them? And I think I understand why. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. He's allowing them to adjust to the journey without his safety there. And so that's part of why Gandalf's like, hush, don't take notice. He doesn't want the dwarves to know this. He wants them to start to feel empowered in their own ability to do things because he knows he's about to leave as well. And the dwarves and Bilbo need to feel like they can continue the journey without a safety net. But also, if Bjorn is out in the distance watching from afar, he has more of a view of what's going on around them than if he was with the group. If there were goblins off on another, edge of their ability to see or perceive, he might catch them before they catch the party. Also, if the goblins see a big bear with them, then they're going to try to ambush them or potentially not engage, but they have everyone together in one spot. That could be more dangerous than Bjorn off on the distance. The goblins try to engage, and then Bjorn shows up, flanks them from the side, and then they take out the goblins. So I think there is some strategy here to his reasoning, to why he's doing this. So their journey continues, and they finally get a view of Mirkwood. And Gandalf says, "The greatest of the forests of the northern world. I hope you like the look of it." And this feels ironic. This feels almost like a joke. And the dwarves started to grumble because Gandalf's like, okay, it's time to send back the ponies. We've gotten as far as we want. And we get this line, "Bjorn is not as far off as you seem to think." So Gandalf's starting to clue them into what's going on here. "And you had better keep your promises anyway, for he is a bad enemy. Mr. Baggins's eyes are sharper than yours." So he calls out Bilbo and is like, okay, Bilbo, you saw it. You were right. "If you have not seen each night after dark a great bear going along with us or sitting far off in the moon watching our camps, not only to guard you and guide you, but to keep an eye on the ponies too," because remember, the ponies are his friends. "Bjorn may be your friend, but he loves his animals and as his children. You do not guess what kindness he has shown you in letting dwarves ride them so far and so fast, nor what would happen to you if you tried to take them into the forest." So there is a piece of this as well. He wants to make sure that they maintain their promises and keeps the ponies safe. And then we get this question about the horse. Thorin was like, well, what about the horse? And Gandalf says, well, I'm not going to send it back. And he's like, but wait, what about your promise? And then Gandalf says, I will look after that. I am not sending the horse back. I am riding it. And this is his way of saying, I'm not going with you, which he had already told them, but now has to remind them because maybe they were hoping that it wasn't true. And my guess here is that he would head over to Bjorn, have a conversation with him, if he hadn't already, about the other thing that he was going to do, which Bjorn would probably be for. He wants to investigate the necromancer. That's where Gandalf goes. And we get a hint of this in the conversation. He says, I have some pressing business away south. Why would he be going south? We were just warned that you don't go south. South is dangerous. He's going into danger. And why is the south dangerous? Well, one of the main reasons is because the southern part of Mirkwood is close to the necromancer's fortress. That's where things are most dangerous. And Gandalf, at this point in the story, has some very strong questions about what is actually going on and who the necromancer might actually be. So he goes to investigate. And then we get this line, and I always find these little details very interesting. He says, "We may meet again before it is all over, and then again, of course, we may not." This reminds us that Gandalf cannot foresee the future. He can see the general direction things seem to want to go. It's never specifically stated anywhere in the text, but one of the things that seems to be alluded to a lot is that Gandalf often has a sense, kind of an inherent sense of the threads of fate, if we could call it that, or maybe the doom of, well, everything in Tolkien's parlance. But he seems to have a sense of where things should go. He has a sense of what he should be doing and a sense of how things could play out. And yet he takes these great risks. And he's never quite sure if they're going to pay off. He just always seems to be going with his gut. And then he says that their ability to see each other again will depend on your luck. Notice the use of luck again, and your courage and sense. This time courage is mentioned along with luck, but also sense. Sense meaning making good choices. And that's why I'm sending Mr. Baggins with you. He knows that deep down, Bilbo has courage and sense and appears to be pretty lucky. There's a reason why Bilbo is here. Then he says this, "I have told you before that he has more about him than you guess, and you will find that out before long." Again, Gandalf cannot predict the future. He does not know what exactly will happen, but he has a sense that Bilbo is tied to the threads of fate in some way. He's the right person at the right time, even if he doesn't always look like it. And then he tries to reassure them and says, think of the treasure at the end, which of course is something the dwarves would be much more inclined to be excited about, and tries to at least help lighten the mood a little bit. So they camp for the night before heading into the forest, and they get up in the morning, they fill their water skins, and Bilbo is complaining because he feels like he's got a lot in his pack. And of course, Thorin says, well, it's better to have too much now because it's going to feel too light later and you'll feel sad about that. And then they say goodbye to the ponies. And we get this little line here. Off they trotted gaily, seeming very glad to put their tails toward the shadows of Mirkwood. And of course, gaily is used, it's happy in this because it's an old text, but also they can sense it. The ponies, the other animals around them at this point have grown quiet. There's contrast here between the way the animals were acting just a day or two before and the way that they're acting now. The ponies are nervous. The animals are quiet. The creatures that they would normally see, that you would expect to see on the eaves of a forest, are not there. This is odd. As the ponies leave, Bjorn leaves too, and Gandalf starts to say his goodbyes. And then we get a little detail about the morning. It had seemed as dark in there in the morning as at night, and very secret. This is the forest, right? They're looking inside the forest. We get this description, a sort of watching and waiting feeling, he said to himself, and this is Bilbo, that the forest is now actively watching and waiting. The forest is making decisions, is active, which is odd. And then Gandalf says his goodbyes, and Thorin says his goodbyes. Everybody's saying their goodbyes, and of course it's taking a little while because they don't want Gandalf to go, and Gandalf wants to make sure that they understand what they need to do. Stay on the track. Do not stray off the track, or nobody's going to see you again. And the long goodbyes here remind me of, my wife doesn't listen to the podcast, but she wouldn't be against me saying this. Every time we go to meet her family, whether it's her parents or extended family out at like a dinner somewhere, and everyone's like, okay, we're done eating, time to go. We all stand up, and they the people at the restaurant who will stand next to their table, everyone's saying goodbye and then just talking for like 5 or 10 more minutes, standing next to everybody eating. That's her family. And it drives me nuts. I'm like, if we're all just going to stand here and talk, can we just like maybe go outside the restaurant so we're not in anybody's way? Drives me nuts. But That's what this feels like to me, is this like they're saying goodbye, but they're not quite ready to go yet. And they just have a few more things they have to say. And of course, it takes a little bit longer. And then before we get to the actually entering the forest, we get this little conversation between Bilbo and Gandalf, which is kind of humorous. Bilbo says, "Do we really have to go through?" He groans. And Gandalf says, "Yes, you do. If you want to get to the other side, you must either go through or give up your quest. And I am not going to allow you to back out now, Mr. Baggins. I am ashamed of you for thinking of it. You have got to look after all these dwarves for me," he laughed. And notice, this is something I noticed, and we're going to finish this section in a second, but it's something I just noticed reading this again, is that the delivery of Ian McKellen in his portrayal of Gandalf matches this. He goes from very serious, "I am ashamed of you for thinking about it. You have got to look after these dwarves for me." And then he kind of laughs, right? That change in tone as he speaks feels very much to me like the way Ian McKellen portrays Gandalf. And then Bilbo responds, No, he says, "I didn't mean that. I meant, is there no way around?" Like the misunderstanding of what he's trying to say. He thinks he's trying to back out, but he's like, "No, I'm just saying, like, do we have to go through it instead of around it?" And he explains that, yeah, you can go 200 miles out of your way to the north and then twice as far to the south. And even then it won't be safe. And then he reminds us, there are no safe paths in this part of the world. You are firmly, basically, this is what he's saying. You are firmly in the land of the Fae, in the wilds. In fact, he says here, you are over the edge of the wild now. Capitalized edge and wild. This is a title. You are in a place that is not like where you came from. So get used to it. Nothing is safe. Nothing is predictable. Everything is strange, including, of course, Mirkwood. And then we get another description about a place they're not going. He continues to explain if they go north, they will come across the slopes of the Grey Mountains, where it is simply stiff with goblins, hobgoblins, and orcs of the worst description. So not just goblins like they've dealt with, but hobgoblins and orcs. And I think this is implying here, like these creatures that of similar stock that are of different size or scariness, because we haven't seen orc used in The Hobbit. We always see goblin, but here he uses the word orc. And then we get mention of the necromancer. If you go south, you would get to the land of the necromancer. And he implies here that Bilbo has even heard stories of that black sorcerer. Gandalf is taking the horse and headed south. And we know if you go south, you get to the land of the necromancer. That's where he's going. And it's so scary. And the stories have proliferated that even the hobbits would know about this. And then he says you shouldn't go anywhere near that place because it's overlooked by his dark tower. And so that conversation comes to an end with Thorin in another humorous moment here before they get into even more danger, saying, "Very comforting you are, to be sure. Goodbye if you won't come with us. You had better get off without any more talk. Like, get on with it. Get out of here. We're done with you. Fine, you're not coming with us." And then Gandalf says, "Goodbye then, and really, goodbye." And I think what that means is farewell and goodbye. Like, hopefully this goes well. Hopefully this is good for you. And then we get at the very end, like they're kind of still not able to say goodbye. Again, reminds me of my in-laws. Goodbye, be good, take care of yourselves, and don't leave the path. Reminder after reminder after reminder. And you know this is foreshadowing. And then we get the final paragraph. Then he galloped away and was soon lost to sight. "Oh, goodbye and go away," grunted the dwarves, all the more angry because they were really filled with dismay at losing him. Now began the most dangerous part of all their journey. They each shouldered the heavy backpack and the water skin, which was their share, and turned from the light that lay on the lands outside and plunged into the forest. Thanks for tuning in again, friends. So go to the Patreon right now. Check it out. I have posted a question on there, or actually I guess it's a question for your questions and comments. Basically, I'm in the bonus episode this week going to be answering some of your questions and comments, and I thought it would be fun to specifically say, like, hey, leave me your questions and comments. This is for free members as well. So basically everybody, patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast. Now, I will be covering some of those questions in the bonus episode today, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue to leave other questions and comments once I've already recorded this episode that I can get to in another future bonus episode. So please, if you have any questions, if you want my perspective on things, if you just want to comment on something, if you have a different perspective of something that's been covered and you want to say, hey, this made me think about this thing. I love all the insights. I love bringing all the knowledge of the community together, but I also love being able to clarify some things. Like if I was too vague about a point and you want to know more about it, let me know. I'll clarify all of that and get into even more details. So that's what's coming up for the bonus episode this week, but it will also be something I cover again in the future. And speaking of the Patreon, welcome to our newest patrons. We've got a bunch of new patrons. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. Eluvrin? I think it's Eluvrin. It feels very elvish. Charles B., Eric J., Todd P., Hannah, and Ray E. Welcome to the Patreon. So glad that you decided to join. I hope you are enjoying your ad-free episodes or your bonus episodes or any of the other stuff that you're getting from the Patreon. Also, I have to shout out all of our VIP patrons. Let's get through it. Let's see if I can do it without messing up this week. We'll find out. AK Music Lover, Aldarian Was Right, Apollo, Atlay Morton, Azzle Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Brandy D, Cali Cat, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, George B, Gerald CFC, Gimli A Break, Ginger Fury, Huon Is My Hero, Jezer, Katie S, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Nick K, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, The Bestest Boy, TJT, and Tour Son of Hoor. I did it. I got through it. I actually didn't mess up anything that time. That's amazing. Maybe now that I've been doing this over 100 times, I'm actually getting better at... No, I will mess up next week. That's what's going to happen. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Also, I don't have any new comments, at least in the United States version of Apple Podcasts. But if you'd like to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, you only need an account. You don't have to listen to the show there. That would be extremely helpful. Leave a 5-star review and I'll read it out on a future episode of the show. You can rate the show on other platforms. You can share it with your friends, all of that stuff. And thanks for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And for those of you checking out the bonus episode, I'll see you in just a minute. So until next time, make sure you stay on the path. Don't leave the path. Please. All right. See ya. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, The Elder Scrolls Lorecast, The Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.